is very powerful. Your mother used her magic to save you and bring me to life. I'm here to protect you, Kubo. And that means you have to do as I say. Don't mess with the monkey.
I don't know that I was prepared for how difficult it was going to be to direct a film. Even, it really took advantage of every job that I've had in this industry up until this point. And even still, it was incredibly exhausting. It was demanding. As a director, you're the nexus of every creative and artistic and technical decision on a film. And so it's a heavy burden. If the film doesn't work, it's your fault. We never even attempted a big sprawling fantasy before. And for good reason. I mean, it turns out it's really hard. It's really, really hard. Oh my God, it's so hard. but that was the movie that we wanted to make. We wanted to tell this incredible, beautiful story, and it required something of this sweep and scale, which is not something that comes naturally when you're working in stop motion. There definitely is a different process to making a CG film than there is to making a stop motion film. Making a stop motion film requires tremendous discipline because you have to build everything. Nothing exists as a virtual object in a computer that you can then just download a new file and then you have another set or whatever it happens to be. You don't have infinite number of characters. You actually have to build a puppet, and you can only use that on one set. And so if you want another set puppet, you've got to build another puppet. You've got to make a new costume. You have to build a new set if you need another set. So everything that we do, because it needs to be built by hand, you really need to put a ton of thought into it, and you've got to be extraordinarily disciplined about how you're using your resources. And so we could never be in a situation where we were 3 years down the road and starting production on a film where all of a sudden we rethink the ideas of the film and had to start over. It just wouldn't work, which is why, and because we're an independent animation studio, we're not part of some big multinational media conglomerate, we've got to be very, very disciplined about how we're using our resources. And so for the first 2-3 years of a project's development cycle, you're fundamentally just focusing almost entirely on the script and the story and the characters and trying to figure out what the thematic ideas are that you're exploring in the film, what aspects of your own life can you weave into it to give it resonance and meaning. But we're really not doing very much visual development at all. We don't find the story in boards like a lot of animation houses do. We basically get the foundation for the script right before we pretty much do any visual development, and then you start figuring out who these characters are, then you start storyboarding. And so by the time we're actually shooting the film, we basically know what the movie is. And it does evolve a little bit as you're making the film. The process of actually shooting the film is 2 years. The whole cycle of the film took about 5 years to create. But by the time we start shooting, we basically know what this movie is. And it might change a little bit on the margins, but it's not going to change dramatically. If you're going to tell a big, sweeping epic story, it has to look big and sweeping and epic. You can't, which is sort of antithetical to how we make movies. I mean, essentially, the way you make a stop motion film is that you have a bunch of gussied up tabletops that you shoot in a big warehouse. And the idea of making that look like a big, majestic, endless, majestic vista is absurd. I mean, we talked about this movie as a stop motion David Lean film, which is kind of silly when you think about how you make these movies. I mean, the biggest set is maybe 20 feet long, and so it was a real challenge to test the crew to make a film like this of this sweep and scale. And so we used basically every trick that we had. It was, by far the most challenging, the most ambitious thing that we've ever taken on at the studio. And so, something like the big skeleton monster, which our heroes face off in this incredible temple.
I got this. I don't got this.
Which was heavily inspired by Ray Harryhausen, who was, an incredible stop-motion filmmaker. And the way we actually built that puppet full scale, this big monster that they face off against, it's this 16-foot tall puppet that weighed 400 pounds, and it's at the base we had to build essentially this metal contraption controlled by a computer that was essentially the same thing you find on a flight simulator or at a theme park ride, a virtual reality ride at a theme park. And that allowed us to move the torso around without fear that the thing would fall over and collapse and crush the animator who was bringing it to life. But essentially, we created this high-tech thing to move the torso around, but at the same time, it was like a marionette because we have these cables that went from the wrist all the way up to the ceiling and dropped back down to the floor that were held in place by plastic buckets filled with sandbags. And so it's a combination of really high-tech stuff and lo-fi stuff that we merged together, which is one of the things I absolutely love about stop motion. But then there's things like, there's a battle on a raging sea, and that's a combination of stuff that we shot as reference on the stage to figure out how we're going to do the water, using panes of rippled shower glass, using pieces of paper, using metal grids that we put garbage bags over, and then we bring that into the computer and then modify and enhance that using CG techniques. But that stuff is really challenging to do as well, because it needs to behave like real water, but it needs to look like the same style that everything else has in the movie. And so there's this one shot that it was one of the first shots that we finished off the floor, and a year and a half later, we actually finished all the visual effects on it. And it was a shot where Kubo's boat is coursing through the water. And when we finally approved that shot coming out of visual effects, the visual effects team actually built a model pinata of Kubo's boat and proceeded to beat the hell out of it with sticks, just in celebration of finally finishing the shot. The exciting thing for me as an artist and as a lover of stop motion is it feels like we really are just scratching the surface of what you can do within this medium. We want the art form to live up to its potential, and so if we can improve, if we can continue to make it better, that's what we're going to try to do. And it just, the ambition, the desire to make these films as beautiful as they can possibly be is always there. From the audience's perspective, they just want to go on a journey. They just want to enjoy a story. And so, which is why we basically try to use every form of filmmaking that we can to bring these things to life. It really is a gumbo of art, craft, science, and technology. And so, the ambition is always there to push and to make these things as incredible, as beautiful, as big and expansive as they can be. And so I don't think there's ever a concern on our part that, it's going to be too good. I mean, we always look at these things like they're flawed, they're imperfect, and there are mistakes in every single frame of one of our movies. But I think that's part of the beauty of stop motion. It's just there's an inherent humanity to how these things are done. It's not mathematically precise. It is something that's brought to life by an artist's hand, which I think is extraordinary.